Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you in your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respect to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Welcome newcomers to the Facebook group and to the podcast. We love hearing the diverse reasons why teachers across the world are joining. We always appreciate and value so much the deep and creative literacy work that's going on in schools. Some of the recent comments from people joining, all teacher comments this time, but ideas for strategies for whole school literacy programs and adapting and planning literacy activities in high school settings. We're really glad that high school people also find some nuggets of gold in the things that we're talking about too. To gain support and resources for teaching effectively, more knowledge and skills on how to support the wide range of learners in my classroom, and what quality texts I can use in my classroom. We'll hear plenty about some good quality text today too. Tips and tricks to pass on to colleagues that I mentor. I'm looking for great mentor texts to use in senior primary school classes, and from a leader, ways to support my teachers and support staff. So if you're not a member of the Teachers Toolkit Facebook group, we'd love you to join and introduce yourself to the group. But now, welcome to this podcast called Teachers Sharing Their Professional Practices, and this is part 2. So last week we had teachers from Mount Barker South Primary School. This week we've got Liam and Liz from Bridgewater Primary School. So 2 teachers who've been working, that I've had the privilege and pleasure to be working with this year in their site, developing their literacy teaching practices. We'll drill down to what Liz and Liam are going to share with us in a moment, but firstly, welcome Liam and Liz.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Sharon.
We're used to sitting and having conversations. It's always such a pleasure. We've had some whole days working together, and then sometimes working in your classrooms as well. But to introduce yourselves and let people know a little bit about you, if you can just tell us year levels that you're working with.
Yep.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit about teaching experience, because we've got... Oh, look, over to you. You start, Liam. Off you go.
Want me to start? Okay.
Yes.
So my name is Liam Bucco, and I currently teach Year 3 and 4 students at Bridgewater Primary School. This is only my 3rd year of teaching, so I'm looking forward to going into my 4th year next year. Teaching's always been a massive passion of mine, pretty much since my Year 5 teacher, actually. He really sparked my interest for the profession with his, passion and enthusiasm and creativity, when it came to learning maths. So for me, I've very much come from a maths upbringing and background, which I actually struggled with to begin with as a student. But now coming into having an appreciation for literacy as well has just been very eye-opening with a lot of the sessions that we've worked on together, Sharon, and the professional developments we've had at Bridgewater, and also some of the early career teacher sessions we've had together as well. So I've sort of found a bit of a love for literacy now too, which I'm sure you'll be able to hear about today as well, and even the conversation we just had a little bit earlier. I love being a teacher. It, gets me up in the morning, and I'm very lucky and grateful to be working with such a talented group of colleagues at Bridgewater. I do feel very blessed in that regard. So, I absolutely love what I do every single day, and I'm sure Liz is also very much the same as well.
Yeah. Oh, Liam, I think we came across each other in your very first year of teaching.
It was actually, yeah.
Yes.
And it was at the education office in Mount Barker.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, no, sorry. It wasn't Ockendoric House.
It was.
I had another PD.
End of year, I think it was that first year. I think it might have been our first year of COVID, and all things sort of got pushed back.
Yeah.
So it
was one of the first face-to-face ones, I think. That
every year, every year of your career,
actually,
we have
every year
had a wonderful opportunity to work with each other. So, okay, Liz, we'll let you have some airtime.
It's all right, I'm used to it. My name's Liz. I'm Liz Sanderson. I've actually been teaching a lot longer than Liam. Probably, I lost count, but it's over 20 years. I actually started my teaching career in the Northern Territory, working in Alice Springs, and then I moved over to Western Tasmania. So I've had a fairly diverse range of teaching experiences, and then been in the Adelaide Hills now for the last 13, 14 years. So it's actually interesting listening to Liam, because one of the biggest pleasures I get out of teaching is seeing students develop a love of literacy and learning. And like just hearing Liam talk about how he never really felt like he was, and even just talking about, he'll talk to you about his biography later on, but he's developed, and it's just that knowing that you can do it. You don't have to be the greatest speller in the world or the greatest reader in the world to start with. You can actually engage with literacy and really enjoy it. And so, I've lots of things about teaching that I love, but this year with working with you and last year with you, Sharon, has sort of consolidated a lot of things that I know that is good practice teaching, but also learning a whole heap of new ideas and strategies too, which has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been exciting. It's been absolute. You're in a school that has a strong culture of learning, a good strong learning culture at student level and at teacher level. So a real valuing of the learning process, and
And
so
that we're always learning.
And we're always,
always.
And the energy in that. And that's what I
always
always feel. Yeah, that's what I always feel. And I know we're going to get plenty of energy today. And that's what I really hope listeners are really you're going to benefit from hearing that energy. Because it's exciting work that they're doing. So part of the work at Bridgewater, especially this year, 2022, has really been linking for the literacy block, but really linking the reading and writing. So integrating that work, and actually not just integrating it in the reading and writing, but letting that spill into integrating it across the curriculum. And both Liam and Liz will share aspects of that. And particularly the work around using good quality literature, which really links to that thought that we always talk about, that our students can only write as well as the literature they're surrounded by. So that idea of bringing in good literature and using texts as mentors, as real drivers for the teaching and the learning. So reasons for the topic today. So what kinds of things are we thinking about? So as teachers, we're really looking for meaningful ways to engage our students in their literacy learning and to really find that spark that, Liam, you've already mentioned your Year 5 teacher sparked in you, and we really, that's the thing that we're looking for our students to, as you mentioned, Liz, to really bring our students into, yes, I can do that, I can engage, I can be motivated to engage in this. Students can disengage when learning experiences are sometimes once off, and then they don't see the reason for that experience. And so we really want to talk today about the connectedness and the integration of reading and writing being really reciprocal processes, and how both Liz and Liam have gone about doing that. We're looking for ways to more easily cover a number of skills and strategies in the curriculum through integrated approach to teaching reading and writing, and ways to engage students with an exciting range of text types. And Akara absolutely points us in that direction. And so I've asked Liz and Liam to talk specifically about two text types that they've worked with in an integrated way this year. Liam with autobiographies and Liz with poetry. And poetry can often be the groan factor for teachers when they go, teaching poetry. It can sometimes be the groan factor for students, where it's like, oh, not poetry. So, two really rich text types that we're working with. So, Liam developed his reading-writing unit on autobiography. So, Year 3-4 class, writing autobiographies. So, would you like to tell us, I think it's probably easier if you tell us a little bit about how you developed the unit.
Sure.
Would that be where you'd like to start with that?
Yeah, of course.
And of course, the integration of that. How did you really get the reading and the writing of that unit going?
So I actually had to transport myself back to 2007 in my Year 6 classroom as a student.
As a student.
As a student. So I know it sounds a little bit silly, but I almost had to remember what it was like being a student and being in the student's shoes to start sort of backfilling and planning my unit. I already had the idea in my head. I remembered my autobiography I had written in Year 6, and we had Roald Dahl's Boy as our class novel. And so my teacher at the time, Mr. Duffield, I remember him vividly reading it, and I just remember tuning out, looking at the clock and, wondering when it was home time. However, it was very soon after that I realised we were going to be writing about ourselves. That's what autobiographical writing is. You're writing about yourself and your accomplishments, your endeavours, what you've been able to achieve in your life, and you're writing about yourself, and that really interested me. So for me as a teacher, I was remembering those things, and I actually found my autobiography from Year 6 that I had managed to dig up, and I started just flicking through the pages and, remembering being in that classroom and working on it, and, at the time having to handwrite all the pages, and there were a few that had been typed up as well, but it was mainly being transported back that I then had to think, what, as a teacher, do I need to include? What are the things I'm looking for? What do I want my students to learn about? What do I need them to include? What am I really looking for in understanding what an autobiography and biography writing is? And so it was a bit tricky because having a Year 3-4 composite class, I believe in Year 3 they were looking at memoir writing. So I kind of just consolidated it into just making an autobiography unit and using my own autobiography as a mentor text, along with my colleague Caitlin and I using...
Actually, whilst you're thinking about that, Liam, I think one of the points that you've already made clear is that when you were about to do your own autobiography, your teacher was using Boy
as a mentor
text, but maybe not. Maybe one of the reflections that you had on that was that actually maybe there wasn't real clarity about that as a mentor text.
Yeah.
That
it wasn't labelled as a mentor text. It was our class novel, and we were using it as a supporting text, which is what a mentor text is. It was When I Was Little Like You. I just found it by Mary Melbunker. When I Was Little Like You. So that was our class mentor text that my colleague Caitlin and I had decided on for our unit, and to also pick other pieces as well. So we visited our library at school and found a whole heap of a plethora of different autobiographies and biographies, and then started, for me in my planning, started to sort of just place them strategically within my unit, along with all of the mini lessons I had planned with supporting anchor charts and things like that. Lots of visuals for the kids to connect with. So it was really about giving them a rich variety of texts to explore and to make comparisons and judgments on.
I haven't actually read it. So, but were there lots of little parts that you could pull out and go, right, we'll focus on this today?
When I was little, So, you know, for example, one mini lesson we had was looking at the layout and the structure of how Mary had designed her book, and sort of the themes, the colour themes, patterns, and even just having just a mini lesson around how do you organise the layout of your book. How do you organise the layout of a page? How do you want your page to look? And quite often we don't even think of that.
So that engages the reader.
And so it engages the students, and they really then take ownership of, this is how I want my page to look. This is my page about, an interesting story when I was a kid lost at the museum, and I want to make sure I've got in the background a museum landscape. Just little things like that really made
noticings.
Noticing,
and
there
really,
you go.
Yes, the things that they were noticing. So engaging. I liked how you used the word strategically, that you used the texts strategically. Whether it's strategically or intentionally, but I love that term, you use them strategically, because that's what you were wanting them to do, was to see as a writer, not just Mary in her book, but in the other autobiographies and biographies that you had, to actually look at the strategies that those writers were using that they could notice.
And just coming back to that, the noticing was really important for the whole of the unit, and that being a real driving point for what do I do next? What's next?
Yes.
Which for a lot of students, they ended up, making more and more pages that we hadn't initially planned for, but even a COVID page that came out of nowhere and completely blew me out of the water in the end.
Wow.
So it's really interesting, and that was then picked up with a lot of the sharing, which we would quite often then do as a class after each sort of session or mini lesson, and just giving them that feedback then to act on, and then they can implement it straight away. And that whole process was very beneficial for all, and multiple entry points for all students, even those that might be struggling or maybe aren't as interested or intrigued, maybe like myself when I initially started my autobiography. So, yeah.
Actually, you mentioned before the podcast that for some of your children you also included things like assisted technologies.
Yeah,
So talk to us a little bit about, because you used a really important term a moment ago about making sure every child had an entry point into the whole process. So,
and a lot of that again stems back to me as a student myself, and also now as a teacher, and finding it very tricky. Where do we get started? How do I get started with writing? How do I get started with planning and coming up with ideas? And for some of us, it's quite easy. For others, it can be a real challenge. So I've got a lot of students. I've got some that have dyslexia and are very reluctant to even begin writing, and some that just struggle in general with writing. Writing's not, something they hold in very high regard, and again, very reluctant. We've got some that also have dysgraphia as well. So a lot for them, they've got the ideas, but it's the struggle in actually getting those ideas on paper and writing.
Yeah.
And so using an iPad, I know a lot of people might be rolling their eyes or maybe trying to tune out a little bit, but using text-to-speech functions have absolutely been life-saving for a lot of these kids, because they can talk to an iPad, they can talk, all kids love talking, and they get their ideas down, it records them, and then they can start sort of backward planning from there. And so there's an entry point.
And then they can actually go back and edit it themselves, read it and look for where.
Yes.
And, so,
and you can actually, I only learnt this when I was, you'd say full stop and it puts a full stop in, so they can, they know where.
Say space or backspace or new paragraph, and even just some of that, hearing them talk about and listening to that vocabulary and that the language building around that too, and even having other students that had finished or had maybe a little bit further along would go back and support some of these students. And even with our wonderful SSOs that we have that have an understanding of these technologies, and just seeing the confidence for those kids to go, I can write, I can produce, I can do this. I mean, as a teacher, you can't ask for anything more. So it's just wonderful. And it's that entry point that has allowed them, that might be the spark that they have for their, their lifelong journey as writers and readers, that this is their starting point, which I'm hopeful it is.
Because the writing shouldn't just be attributed to how quickly they can write it down.
Exactly.
With pen and paper. We're talking about all of those processes that make us a writer. The craft of writing means all of those elements that, in fact, even in a planning phase, to be able to orally rehearse what I have to say, for many children who might, for whom physically, the handwriting part of it or the physical writing it down might be difficult, they may still find that technology is a great way for them to catch their ideas or to orally rehearse it. So then organising that information. What I think the technology doesn't take away from all of the processes. No. So organising it, editing it, what conventions are required. Yeah. Where's my voice?
Exactly,
in
and
this?
How it's important, how it sounds, how I want the reader to read this.
What can I now add into that? What word could I use instead of that one? Or...
Yes. So I think that's the really powerful thing for us all to remember, is that we need to get the entry point for them, but we're not taking away just by finding an entry point to address one part of the process isn't diminishing.
No.
All the other parts of the process and how much they're doing the thinking and the work of that.
And for a lot of them, it's also as well, if they've voiced what they wanted to say, they've got their ideas down, and they still maybe need to fix some things around. That's where I might come into the picture and we start doing some editing together. And in that process, they can then actually start handwriting it down. If they know, I've got the correct spelling, that's how it looks. I can then focus on my handwriting there and my paragraphing and my spacing. So I don't have to stress now. I've done the hard yards. I've planned. Now I can just actually write. And so for a lot of them, they did go back and do lots of handwriting from that, or some of them have chosen to do, have a written, typed piece that they've included in their autobiography. So it just was very complimentary.
And I think for me that's been the integrated bit as well, is the spelling and the handwriting and all those things that are all part of literacy it's not just reading and writing. That's what and so a lot of my spellings come through my reading and writing and my focus in my units of work.
Yeah, good connection to make there. Yes, it isn't, because of course a lot of these things that we're talking about, the spelling, the handwriting, they only exist because we want to have it written.
Yeah.
And so that somebody can read it. So those things are in service to reading and writing and are a complete integral part of that. So, yes, you're absolutely right. It's, the word work, how that can just be driven by the reading and writing work. But most importantly, that's where the word work gets to be used.
Yes.
That it's being used, as I'm writing. The more I'm writing, the more I'm using that knowledge. The more I'm reading, and if I'm getting kids to be reading and noticing, then they're going to be seeing those words. There's a word, I'm going to collect that word. I want to use it. I know how to use it. I know how it's spelt. I know. Yeah.
And we've developed personal dictionaries around that, where they're noticing the words that they need to use, so they're writing that, but also words that they'd like to use in their writing and putting those into their dictionaries.
Yes,
so they can use them later on.
Beautiful. Now, we will come back to Liam, but Liz, tell us a little bit about how you developed your poetry unit.
I stumbled on the particular mentor text with you, Sharon, on one of our workshops, but you were reading Michael Mapergo's Carnival of Animals, where you had it there and we were sharing it, and it kind of sparked, because my co-teacher and I teach part-time year 5s. I've had them for 2 years, so they've done a fair bit of poetry, and they actually, most of them quite enjoy it. They find it quite freeing because there's so much how do you call it? I don't know how you say it. Diversity in how they can write it, and there's not so many rules in terms of. There are some poetic rules, but we focus a lot on free verse and how you can set it out, and the punctuation's a little bit different and all that sort of thing. But we had done a bit of that, but we'd been working. But before that, they'd been doing a lot of work around information text, and we'd had Bridgewater Zoo, and they'd all investigated an animal, and they'd written reports. So it was very much informative writing. And when you brought up the Michael Mapergo's, and it's like it was told from the perspective of an animal. The poems were from the perspective of the animals, and we thought that'd be fantastic. They know a lot about their animal that they've researched. Now let's go a bit more creative and have them do mask poetry. Or was you that mentioned? I don't even think I knew what mask poetry was. I knew about perspective, but I didn't know. And so then
to be quite honest, I don't think I knew it much before you did, actually, that's what that poetry is when it's written from, the point of whoever the speaker is of the poem. I'm not articulating that well at all.
And you're putting yourself in the animal's shoes, or it could be an inanimate object. So that's the other thing. Yes. So we explored some of that when they had a bit of a play with some of that, with writing about being a shoelace or a shoe or a sock, or they even did a Father's Day poem from Dad's perspective. We've got a couple,
lovely.
And it was like coffee. Where's my coffee? Things like that. It was so we did a bit of playing. We had a look at, and so we used Michael Mapergo's as a mentor text, and we used it to unpick so many things like the language, the voice. You know, how do we know that the lion thinks himself king of the jungle in this particular poem? And we unpicked all that structure and all that sort of thing. And then they had to go, and then we talked about our own animals, and then we did some planning around that. And when we were talking about the planning process before, it's interesting because I feel like I've let go a bit of that. I don't tend to give that many performers in terms of planning. It's more around let's talk about it, brainstorm some words, write some down if you need to. But some of them just like to write first to plan. Yeah. And then, so a lot of them were writing sort of narrative to start with, and then we looked at how we can then, and then we had, that was like, oh, I'm noticing you're writing it like a story rather than a poem. Yeah. So then we did some mini lessons around that and looked at the structures in the book. So it was that. So, but some of them immediately wrote in a different way, you know, in terms of the, so that, you know, their planning was different. But some of them literally wrote it like they were writing an information point that I am a lion and I roar, you know, that's, and so, but it was a start and it was someone to work with. And then we were, and it was amazing. We did so much reviewing and editing and going back and okay, let's today look at how we might be able to add a simile or a metaphor into our writing. So they just go back and look at that, just that particular part and go back. And so we had, as you saw when you came into my room and noticed, their pages were covered in yellow, green, red, where they've edited and reworked, and some of them said, I just want to write that out again, so they'd written it out again, and so even a small piece of writing, it took quite a long time, the whole process, because of all the editing and the mini lessons we did around the editing process and the review process.
Yes, and that, you know, we talked about that. I know in the workshops we even talked about that, you know, and this isn't an uncommon thing that we find our students really finding revising a challenge, and
even
do
in the
we
word itself, revising or reviewing?
Yes, yeah,
a lot of blank expressions.
But it's like if you break it down into a really small, achievable bit, they just literally we're just looking. What can you change in your writing today? Just one thing, and then we share back, and and then it's amazing how I've got some examples.
I found that cycle to be so much more engaging for the students as well, and taking ownership of their work and wanting to do better or wanting to improve on something. because that way, when we're sharing and giving feedback, then if we aren't having and allowing them to have opportunities for that, then they aren't growing, and they're not looking for those areas of growth.
Yeah.
You know, what can I work on next, or what am I missing, or what did I miss during this lesson? And I think that's going back to then that whole cycle of then this is why we review our work. This is the importance right here. This is why we do it.
Yeah. And if they start with something really basic, it's like that. Well, that's great start. You've got something there to work with. I'm going to call him Bob because I don't know. I just think Bob's a funny name. But it's about a reindeer. But I have big hooves. I live in forests. This is the first draft. I have big hooves. I live in forests. My hooves dig for food. It changed to my hooves can barely be seen as I run through the Arctic tundra. So it changed because I said, well, what do you know about this? Where do they live? Oh, they live in the Arctic tundra. Well, let's see if that's beautiful. Let's see if we can. So just little things, yeah. But this is a reluctant writer as well. Someone who eventually,
Yeah. There's a whole lot of really key points there that you talked about, that you let your students plan differently, that it's not a pro forma type start for the planning, but that planning, and I'm guessing that in opening up that planning, as you said, you found them planning in lots of different ways. Do you feel like they're exploring more about how they can plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we stop all the time. Well, I rove and we talk one-on-one, but then I will stop them and get them to share some of the ways that they've planned, and that because that really helps those ones that are still stuck there going, I don't know what to do. I've found that's been really valuable. Most of them are more than willing to put their hands up. In fact, it sometimes takes up too much time now. We have to cut it short. And I think that's a thing that I've got to. I'm not a big one for planning on a set pro forma, with your hamburger performance. I mean, they can work for some people. That's fine. But they don't have to.
No.
And I've got a friend who's a writer, and she says, I said, do you want to come in and talk about the planning process? She goes, well, my planning process is kind of, I just write and then I go back and rewrite, and that's how she does it. So
just highlights how different everyone is in terms of how we plan.
Yeah. And it opens possibilities.
It does open possibilities.
Yeah.
And actually, it gives children different entry points.
Yeah. They can start with 3 words and it's an entry point, and then we can add to that.
Yes, yeah.
And I do like that whole process of then going back and adding. That's what for our autobiography unit, we had manila folders that we kept all of our work, our drafts, plans, rough sketches, photographs, anything of for inspiration within these manila folders. Thanks for the tip, by the way, Sharon. And just having them in their book boxes on their desks for them to go, I was working on that. I'll grab that out and finish that off now. I've got a quick 5 minutes, or, I remember doing that. Or so-and-so gave me that helpful little reminder about working on or trying this to help with my planning or my organisation. I'll try that. And just seeing that and the support within the classroom. And even those little moments of, just after lunch, everyone's exhausted, they might just grab and just work on a little bit at a time, and just that whole process that we're not, all right, everyone, this is 45 minutes we're dedicating to. We're looking at writing. We're going to have 15 minutes set out for, a teacher instruction. Then you can go off and you just looking for those little moments that literacy wasn't just one lesson we're doing of writing or editing or reviewing in a week. It's continuously happening, constantly, and then they're more empowered to actually give it a go and keep working with it.
And it kind of takes on a life of its own. You know what your next step is when you see what's going on. You think, right, we'll look at this bit tomorrow because I'm seeing that they're repeating their sentence starters or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah. And you talked about that nice, in roving.
Yeah. Having
eyes on students as they're writing to be able to do 2 things. Collect, like to notice and collect. This is what will elevate our writing, or take us, to another level. If we either look back at a mentor text or share something that somebody in the class has written.
Yeah,
that's a common one, isn't it? And a powerful one.
And I think that's what we moved on to more than the actual mentor text after a while. We were using other people's and we were using them all the time, and that was really powerful. And then we were using, that gave us an opportunity to then make anchor charts around certain little, I'm putting that word in there. Anchor charts around things like let's crack open the noun and make that noun more powerful in the sentence or, or the verb or so things like that. So, it was good. And using other because I've got some quite mature writers in my room, and they're always willing. Yeah, and it's been really helpful. Their mentor text, they love having theirs used as a mentor text.
Yes.
And it's not just we use everyone's, even the dyslexic kids who are reluctant to write. They were so happy to share what they'd achieved, and did a really good
isn't
job.
it? That's it. Everybody is the writer, and
I think poetry is really good for that too.
It is, and it gives us that opportunity to say, you know what, this is what I was trying to do as a writer in this line or in this phrase or in this part of what I was doing, that it, it might not be that we've worked on everything yet, but just to be able to draw, and to say, look at the difference this has made by just what I've done here. I do want to just make sure that we talk a little bit about that planning process, in that, Liam, you found in doing the autobiographical writing that you weren't just going through the writing cycle as one complete once only cycle, so that it wasn't just a plan, draft, edit, publish. Can you just talk us through a little bit about how that ended up looking in your class and how that worked so well?
So at the start, we looked at the writing process and tried unpacking it together as a class, and there's obviously lots of hiccups, lots of tired and glossy eyes looking at me as I was going over it. Oh, we've done this before. I know how to write. And I said, okay. And so we started out by doing a mini lesson for each writing process. And we started with one piece of writing. We've used our quick write books that we have just for those little snippets, little short pieces where we might have a prompt or a topic to write about. And so we started there with planning, and we worked our way through. So we started at planning, then went on to drafting, then went on to editing, reviewing, and then publishing. And so at each little stop, we only had to do it once, was looking at what do we want to refine, what do we want to get right at each cycle. And it was understanding the importance, why we do each cycle, why we have to stop at each point, and what we need to do. And
so you mean each part of your autobiography?
Each part of our autobiography. Yeah. So when it came to, say, we looked at our mentor text and we picked, okay, this is what is going to be our focus today. So it might be looking at, here Mary's spoken about, living on a farm or having some animals. So, okay, we've got some pets. So we might be looking at designing our pets page. And so we started out with a broad little brainstorm together as a class, which, got all the kids talking different types of animals, what we have and what we can bring to that conversation. And then moving from there, they could then independently go into start editing and then doing their own little brainstorm. And in that cycle, from a mini lesson and an anchor chart, actually constructing what they wanted the page to look like, just from the conversations we were having, and then sharing that back as a class, even having to think about whether it's something was in landscape or portrait, and how we wanted our pages to flow. Because at this stage, you're working on a page at a time. You don't have your finished book out in front of you. You don't have the layout of what it's going to look like when it's finished as you're working on it the whole way through. So that's part of the process, is there's multiple entry points, because you're not limited to what page you could work on or what you could do on that page. For some kids, they found it easy to write about their family holiday or a trip they've been on. For others, it was doing a pets page, or it was doing my favorites or hobbies page.
Yeah.
And so they're then using that cycle all the way through, but each time they're using it, they're becoming capable of doing it independently without needing teacher support and feedback. Of course, I'm still giving that as I'm drafting their work, and I'm working on it with them as I'm roving around during our sessions. But each time you're just sort of chipping away at them, and they're just taking a little bit more away each time, that then they feel confident enough to go, I understand the process, and this is why it's important to do all of these steps.
So they were using the same process for each part.
For each part, they're using the same process. We're not going back and going, all right, we're just doing...
edit the whole lot now.
Yes.
So everyone work on your pet page.
We'll all write, we'll do a draft of our entire autobiography.
Yeah, and then I'll look at it.
And then we'll, come back and we'll review and revise, and then we'll go on to publishing. Instead,
correct,
you took them through that full cycle for each page.
Yeah. And I believe they have more of an appreciation for it as well, that to them it doesn't feel like, and to me as well, it didn't feel like we're actually completing this big, arduous project, that it's slowly coming together piece by piece. And over time, it's something you can become more and more proud of. And I was seeing that within their work. Each session we had, each writing, some of the kids were even so keen, when's our next autobiography writing lesson, when are we working on it next, because they were so keen and eager to get started that they've got something to work on, and they feel confident enough to do it. And they understand
they knew the process.
They knew the process,
and I feel like that sets them up for the ones who want to. You can do as many pages as you like, then, can't you?
Correct.
So the ones that are going to take their time over a couple of pages, that's great. The ones that are obviously
you're going to race through and
they may be able to do
keep
more,
churning out pages.
So it gives that differentiation.
And for them, it turned into an opportunity where we started thinking of, what are some bonus pages or additional pages we could add? What have we not thought of? And that's where COVID-19 came out of being a page and going, how has that impacted our lives? What's life been like, pre-COVID, post-COVID? What's it looking like now? That would be a brilliant page to have. I really liked that. I'm going to steal that idea. I want that to be a page as well. And so it's turned into that feedback cycle and that sharing of work as we're going along, that allowed them to go, I'm taking ownership of this, and I really want to create this wonderful finished product that I'm proud and I'm happy to show. And that's then back reflective of the whole planning process. Is I wanted students to feel capable and confident to give this a go, and to be able to go at it at their own pace, that they didn't have to feel they were competing against each other to see who could finish first or who could have the most pages, because then I think it loses its substance and its impact
and its purpose. So really that idea of having the cycle, so the plan, draft, revise, publish cycle a number of times does suit itself to autobiographical writing, to biography writing, to in fact informational text writing. So or an information report, there's to poetry. If we were publishing different, or if we had a collection of poems, it's possible for us to. So I think it's really good for us as teachers, to think which types of writing really benefit from that cycling through, rather than it only being the cycle once. That if we can cycle multiple times, each time they go through the cycle, they're learning more about the cycle itself, and they're having more practice at it. Because if we sometimes think, if we've worked on a piece for a term and we've gone through the cycle once, we haven't got very experienced, as writers, in the process. The writing process is important. So that opportunity to really have, how many pages might have they done for their biography or their autobiography?
So they've got 12 pages.
Oh, my word.
Which is a lot.
Oh, my
and
word.
So it's been a massive project.
Yes.
It's due at the end of this week, so they've still got a little bit of time to finish it off.
Yeah.
However, it's been about a term and a half they've been working on it. So we haven't spent the whole time within literacy just on
that
autobiography writing. We've been coming back to it every now and again. So we've also been looking at procedural text as well. And
have you found a
poetry
spillover?
Too.
Have you found?
Yeah, well, as I said, earlier, within the writing process itself, going, oh, this is part of the writing process. And I found a lot more kids were enthusiastic and engaged with their writing because they took ownership of it. It's not saying that they weren't before, but they were noticing that, maybe I was struggling a bit with my paragraphing, and that was something I wanted to work on. So within the reviewing section, I know I'm really going to look for and honing in on my paragraphing because I'm just writing in big blocks, and it's very hard for someone to pick this up and to try and understand my thoughts and where I want to start and end. So I started hearing a lot more conversations about, this is what we did, when we looked at this as part of the writing process, or this was within that mini lesson where we were looking at acting it out, or this was in our this was on our anchor chart that we could see about the layout of our. And so just having those little conversations and hearing students talk about that and just have that passion for writing and for wanting to give something a go, especially for those reluctant writers, that they've done the hard work and they've been doing it all along, but they just haven't realised it because for them it hasn't been. It's been a constant review of the writing process. So
I've found that we've honed into several things several times through different genres the whole year, and it's really noticing now
really
that when they're doing, we're just giving them a stimulus to write about. Now they're doing it automatically. They're thinking about the similes in there or the metaphors or, the way they're writing and going back and they know full well now that they're never going to go, I'm done. And they just don't do that anymore. And so that's been one of the great, and it has transferred across. Even when you're writing information text, they're much more interesting and, enjoyable to read.
So there is that spillover.
There is definitely a spillover.
Yeah.
I think even as a whole site too, that's seems to be the general consensus when we've met back and looked at moderation and just analysed the students' work from start of the year to now, seeing the impact that it's had, and just sharing that amongst each other as colleagues it's been wonderful to then hear that feedback and go, oh, well, that's working for you. Oh, we've been having similar conversations, and the students are feeling the same as the receptions of the year ones, and just hearing that it's having a lasting impact is really
and they don't
powerful.
groan when they have to write.
No.
No. In fact, there's been some big publications. I want to get to that publishing part of what you've done too, because Liz, you also connected the poetry to
oral.
But actually, I don't think we even got to mention that you the mask poems they did they do them just from?
They did it from two perspectives.
Yes.
Well, the idea we talked about whether they would do it from the perspective of being in the wild and free or in captivity. Some of them combined their poems and they did it more from the point of view of being hunted and that sort of thing. So there was that human aspect to it. But then some did write two different poems from different perspectives. And so they came out, they were really powerful in the end. So, that was another thing we discussed as when we were in our PD. That's why it's so great to talk to people about what you're doing, because they go, oh, that's a great idea. We can do two different perspectives,
Yes.
So that was really good.
I've shared that myself with a few people that you've done that, Liz, because it's such, for mask poems, it's such a great way for that to be, to be brought out, that I can write two poems from one human being or one animal's perspective on being in different situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And My word, that's powerful.
And even for them to try to think really hard about what it might be.
Yes.
And that's just spills over to lots of things in terms of emotional intelligence and learning and things.
Exactly.
Yeah, even if you're given, say, a high school student or even an adult, that's a task like that. It's quite challenging.
And we found it spilled into our latest. We've got the Chris Van Allsburg work going on, and some of that's like we've been doing script writing with Jumanji and things, but there's a lot of perspective in some of his books. There's a lot of it from inanimate objects, and so they've been grasping that and running because they've already been doing the mask poems. So
they're making
connections with that and actually writing from the perspective of other objects and things. So
wow.
using the same style as Chris Van Allsburg.
It's that noticing, isn't it? And that they're noticing. I wanted to make the connection. I think I make it just about every time, and people will be going, yep, she says this every time. But ACARA talks about, our Australian curriculum talks about that our students learn how to use texts to inform them to write their own. And so right here, you're talking about them doing that. It doesn't take much to get them into the noticing, does it?
No.
And then here you are talking about how they're doing that, across, not even just in that type of writing or in that unit, but doing that noticing at other times and what they can do with that. What have they learnt from that? What can they do with that? So
I wanted to mention the oral language too,
yes.
because with poetry, obviously, it lends itself to really. So we had a big discussion about the fluency as well, and the different parts of fluency and unpicking that, and what so tone and tempo and enunciation, and speed and what words you might emphasise when you're reading and things like that. And we've done a lot of sharing and oral reading poetry as well, but that's really helped. That, like we said before, about being mentors for other people. We've got a lot of writers who are grammatically and in spelling, they're really accurate, but they haven't necessarily in the past had the imagination and the flair that some of the other ones that will read their writing out to us, and we're going, wow, look at the imagery you've got. And they've actually started to, some of those really sort of, I don't know how you call them, what would you call those writers that are they're very accurate and very, they'll probably do quite
safe.
Well. Safe,
yes.
Yeah, but they've added much more voice to their writing.
That's the word, isn't it?
And I think that's come from other students. And often those students are the ones that if you looked at their writing, there might be spelling mistakes, but they're having a go at these words that doesn't matter about the spelling mistakes because the words are perfect in terms of what they're using.
The ones they've chosen.
And I think with poetry that was really good. So we did a lot of work around, they even edited, after they'd actually written their poems, they then went back and looked at how they were going to read them. And that was really powerful. And that was their publishing, was the reading of the poems too. And actually made masks too.
Yes.
And that became, I thought they was going to make basic masks, but they ended up being quite realistic.
Oh, they're absolutely fantastic.
I would say their masks were elevated like their writing was. They really, those masks really came to life because their writing was truly alive, wasn't it? Yeah.
So from it all, from all the research about their animals and then through to the creator, they just became really into they've got a very, very good understanding of a lot of different genres. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And it's nice to be able to have that lead up to something new, not just to, okay, done with that now.
On to the next thing.
Next thing, but to be able to bring knowledge from one area to what we're going to
transferability that it offers.
Yeah,
and it's been really good about your unit.
And I think that's the thing is just go with what's really interesting for them, but then weave it into what you need to do. And we did review writing as well. Again, they reviewed each other's videos on their animal reports, so we did that. So that all
nice. Yeah, great connection. Yeah. And you're 2 days a week. 3 days. Sorry, Liz. 3 days a week in your classroom. And just by the by, so that listeners know, so you were running the poetry part on your 3 days, and your co-teacher was running something else.
Yeah,
on those
she was,
days.
and she was covering a lot of the writing. She was running different. Yeah, and she ran the animal information reports and did all.
Yes,
We work together, but she covers certain areas and I cover other areas. But the poetry was my thing.
Yeah,
and she's now focusing on the perspective writing with Chris Van Olsberg, so it works in really well.
Yeah, because I was going to say you plan together, but you also have had some threads of things running through, and that's what I think is really important for us to acknowledge, is that planning with a colleague looks like lots of different ways, and that it can play out in different ways at different times. And that's what really helps helps to keep the flow of things, and as soon as we get locked in and saying, well, it's just going to be like this, then we can't flow with it as much as we.
And it's been great. We talk about where we're up to and what we've done and what's worked and what hasn't, and then what we might go to now. And that's why things take longer than they. But then we fitted so much in when you think about it. When you actually, even though it might take slightly longer to get through it all, it certainly weaves its way through.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Just tell us a little bit, how as a school do you do the planning? Do you plan in teams? Do you plan?
I guess it really depends on what we're sort of focusing on, but generally we normally just plan. We might do a sort of whole site staff plan and then maybe break off into smaller groups, so maybe year levels. Obviously we're a very, very small school, so it's really hard to try and work with a very specific year level. I'm very lucky. I work alongside another year 3-4 teacher, so we quite often will break off and plan together. And I also have someone else that works for me on a Monday, so us three will try and sort of plan together. And I think Liz, you try and break off with Dan.
So my coach, I'm actually sort of a little bit. I'm the only year 5 teacher this year, so it is a small school. So in the past, we've done a lot more neighbourhood planning. But I guess as a small school, when we've had days like yours, that's where we've kind of got together. And we've done a lot of work around the whole school rubric around, and that's really, and the Bridgewater scope and sequence that we've got. So that's where it's guided us in terms of, all right, we want to cover this. And that's really helped, I think. And then knowing what you've got to do, and then being able to then go and link it into the interest,
which
or
has
the
then
where
allowed us to be able to plan this way that we have is from those conversations, those learning conversations we've had as a whole site, and the days we've had with you, Sharon, as well, those professional development days too, and again going back to honing in on what we want to achieve as a whole site and what we want to achieve at the. And I think we're still a work in progress
and how we hone in that planning, and so we've got the whole site going on, and we know at what this year level what we need to teach, and then it's like, well, it'd be nice to bet sure you've got at least a neighbourhood planning team to be able to work that out, because I team teach with someone else. That's
it. That's where you've got your and I think that's how it seems to work mostly at the school, is that you've. People don't necessarily plan in isolation.
No, that rarely happens at Bridgewater.
Yeah, which I think is what we need as teachers, isn't it?
And we share what we've got, and
resources,
everyone's generous in
ideas,
how
everything.
Actually, one of the things that getting texts and the mentor texts to work with this year, like that was a big focus. That was, your
Gina,
your Gina,
Gina, a wonderful
like
Gina,
genie in the bottle, isn't it? It's like we need books, Gina. Gina did a lot of work. So when you talk about that scope and sequence, it's really like you've got a map at Bridgewater around. The kinds of texts and the kinds of writing and reading or the text types that you're going to work with across a year. And to support that, Gina pulled together
tubs and tubs of mentor
which we're
texts.
adding to all the time, which is great.
Consistently.
So we've developed these units, we're buying the books and adding them to the soaps.
And just comes back to those conversations of, I've been doing my mass poetry unit and this is a wonderful book I'd recommend, that, we should add that to the list, and we can put that for a mentor text bucket or box for poetry. So, it's that sharing of resources again and the different texts.
And we're lucky to have Gina Hall just gather it all together for us if we need.
Yes. And it was such a rich start to knowing that, all right, so for this text type, all right, here's at year level, here's bundles of books already here that we've got, but this whole adding to, do you feel that a year in that your awareness of and knowledge of books that you might want to, literature that you might want to bring to your students has grown?
Yeah.
Keep wanting to try all the things all the time, but there's just
not enough hours in the day.
Note it down somewhere. I'll use that later.
Yes.
Actually, I'm using the important book at the moment for something special, but I don't know. I hope she's not going to listen to this podcast.
Or only after
the
important event. Yes.
But even now, just looking at different texts, that actually would be really good for a unit on that'd be good for an autobiography unit, or that might be a really good book I might use for, talking about informational text.
Yeah, I feel like books. I often use books as a stimulus for. I jump off from there, and then it sort of go down a rabbit hole and find lots of other things. But it's a great way to start. Yeah, sure. That's what I'd recommend to any new teachers that are out. Is find something that's really powerful, and then you'll find it just rolls from there.
Yes. Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
There's planning around it, but it's flexible planning and it's emergent planning.
Make the book work for you.
Yes, yeah, no. And the book frequently is the entry point, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's where it really lets everybody enter in. So are there any other tools or resources that you have found important?
I've got to say that the Jennifer Saravello, the Writing Strategies book, I believe I've got that correct.
You have got it correct.
Just flicking through that, I remember just when I first got it, and we only had 2 at the school. We've now got 1 for every classroom, which is fantastic, but we only had the 2, and I reckon it was our principal's book I had.
Yes.
I'd taken off of her for quite a while and had put all my sticky notes through it, and then I think Liz had taken it off of me for quite some time, and taken off another teacher as well. But all the ideas in that
they're really usable straight away. Grab and go.
And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to think of something new yourself. There are some I adapted myself and went, I really like that, but I wish, it went this way, or I wish it followed on with this. Yep. So I was able to adapt, and I think Liz was the same as well. But they're pre-written. They're there for you. You can add them to your anchor chart booklets or just some anchor charts, and they're visual for the kids. They connect to them. So Jennifer Saravello's book, I couldn't give any more recommendations
she's got
for.
The Writing Strategies book and
obviously
the Reading Strategies book.
She's got, and obviously with the Cara, we've got the Fontes and Pinnell writing continuum.
Yep.
As you've pointed out to us, it's been good for me to see that you go, it's all in there. Like, this is what you just can go to there. Oh, that's what you need to do.
It's more concise, and I can see it's more open to me.
And detailed.
Detailed, yeah.
So for writing, I was just going to say with Jennifer Saravello's books, it's a single page where she where she's really talking about strategy. She always links it to mentor text, and that doesn't mean a particular mentor text. She talks about what kind of mentor text you might be looking for. So it doesn't mean you have to have the one that she's mentioned, if she has mentioned one, but the one that you're using, can be readily adapted to. She gives a little bit of a preamble, but it's a single page, some prompts, some possible prompts that are useful, especially when you're roving with students to
there's some questions on there as well.
Yeah, I think the prompts, and I think that's what she calls the questions. Prompts, or that's some question stems. Yeah. And then she also breaks up the book, and just want to give a nod to that as well as to the literacy learning continuum that Founders and Purnell have, is that both of them are presenting parts of the writing process in a really clear way, so that we've got all of those things around. Well, Founders and Purnell have got just the writing process as one of those aspects. So all those elements of it, from the planning and drafting to reviewing, revising, editing, proofreading, publishing. But then they've also got all those, tremendous sections on conventions and how we are bringing in. So when you talked about mini lessons before, a lot of those mini lessons you're drawing from these resources because they are giving the detail of the very things that are on our Australian curriculum at the year level. So it really lets us get to those things and to say, that's exactly what I've noticed. That's the thing that we need more of. And because Jennifer gives the grade level range, and the literacy learning continuum gives it to us at year level.
As it's in the curriculum.
As it is in the curriculum. So it is just a complete connection. So, I agree. They're planning tools that we certainly don't need to be reinventing, but they're good guides to say, this year level, covering that.
I think if my memory serves me correctly, I believe the writing strategies book is actually separated into those different sections for reviewing, planning.
Yes.
And so you can go to that section and go, and have a bit of a look through and go, that's actually really good.
Yes.
I can use that as a mini lesson or for my anchor chart. So I remember vividly using one of those lessons it was planning the layout of our page. And so then designing and just copying the anchor chart, putting it straight there and utilising it as it was, changing a few little things to suit my class and then went from there and just adapting it to, to suit the needs. And it was there done. Very simple, and made my job as a teacher a whole lot easier. I didn't have to sit and think and plan something to, I had to still plan, but,
it's kind of like the mentor myself, there with you, isn't it?
Yeah. It is in itself a mentor text for you as a teacher. So
And Sheena Cameron as well. She's been
her
strategies, reading strategies. I use a bit.
Yes.
But and as I said, we said before, we did spend some time developing our assessment rubric, which is also helpful in terms of planning, but also assessing
consistency too as a site.
What are we looking for when we're looking for, and what so then we're looking for the next steps,
especially for newer teachers as well that we've had come to our site as well, that they now feel more confident going, this is our consistent approach. This is what we're looking for. This is what we want to achieve. This is what we want receptions to be able to do when they get to year 6, and this is their progress.
The success criteria. We did a lot of work around visible learning, so it fits in well with children knowing what they are looking to achieve and what's the next step.
Yes. And with that visible learning, it's about giving good feedback, but it's also about them reflecting on their own, isn't it? That they know what it is that they are. This is what I was trying to do. This is what I did do. Let's just go back to the rubric for a moment, because you used, we've talked about this before on podcasts, but you've used the 6+ traits of writing rubric.
Yeah.
Yes, you don't have to remember.
There was voice, sentence fluency, organisation.
There you go. Yes.
And it fitted in perfectly with the curriculum. We looked at it in terms of the Australian curriculum and what was in there. Yes.
And so there's the match through the literacy learning progressions.
Yep.
Same categories. And then Jennifer Saravallo's book links in again with those same things. So ideas, organisation, word choice, voice, sentence fluency, conventions, presentation.
Yes.
And so as a school, you spent, the last session of a day really getting that rubric for your year levels. so that you've got, as you said, some nice consistency around that. And I think the tools that you work with then, it's easy to know what to look for, to say, voice. What can we do to lift voice? Or so on a rubric, if a student's low in that part, right, there's something that, we're really going to build in. And it's really those, the idea of that 6+ traits rubric was always about that's what you're using to inform your planning.
Planning, yes, absolutely.
And your teaching and your roving, that you can look at how students are doing with each of those things and to bring more, bring 2 or 3 mini lessons of those things to them along the way.
Oh, I
Yes.
had one more little tip for resources. I
Yes.
remember when you were in, Sharon, and I was taking you through my classroom. This was more specifically for my autobiography unit, but having the resources out for the students, which was laid out on the classroom floor at the front of the room, having paper and different
Yes.
Yeah.
You had
a
some
variety of choice in
choices of publishing
materials.
pieces,
Yeah.
materials.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was really, really important. Just more specifically for that unit of work, but that for them that they could go pick and choose and how they wanted. Again, going back to the layout of their pages, so going back from a mini lesson to then looking at planning their page out and what resources they wanted to use, what type of paper, card, how they wanted it to look, all of those sorts of things, and having that choice and those options laid out for them at the front of the class. It worked wonders for them that they felt more ownership of their work, and we're going, I want it to look really, really nice, or I want to include that, or make it look like.
And the key word that I'm going to use here is the word use, that in all of these processes, they're using the very strategies and skills that you've been teaching them. And that can't help but play out in, just such great growth for them along the way.
I did have your Teachific website on there as well in terms of the tools and actually using like the reading calendar and things like that. And then you've actually summarised things that they can use for goals. I found that really useful in terms of their reading. Like you need to set yourself a reading goal. Well, these are the sorts of things that at Year 5 level you should be doing, like choosing books that are of interest to you and all those sorts of things. So I know that I have to plug you there just a little bit. But we've used a lot of those like bits and pieces.
Well,
as tools.
That's good to know. Yes, that there's been, and I suppose that's what we were trying to do with Teachific, but it helps even more when, that's the way that you're operating in a school, that you can find those tools that are really going to support that kind of work that you're trying to do. So
it's a good record for the students as well to be able to write. Yeah, that's what I've found. Yeah.
Especially keep track of as well.
Yes. I often think those calendars, I just think it'd be great to have some photos of some of those going up on the Facebook page sometime, because I think other children would actually be really interested in seeing what other children at their age are actually reading.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up with this then. What has there been an absolute favourite aspect of the year? So really, this has been a year of really planning a bit differently, really making those intentional and strategic connections with reading and writing and the range of text types across the year. Not saying that it wasn't what you were doing before, but as a school site, you've probably been a bit more intentional around that. What has there been a favourite aspect for you?
I think, if I'm going to say it in one sentence, so just in terms of what, for me, it's actually really enjoying reading my children's writing now. Like it's not an arduous task to actually get the kids and actually read their writing and really enjoy it, and it makes you laugh out loud or it makes you want to cry or So, or listening to them read. So
Yes.
you know how sometimes you go, oh, God, I have to
read another one. Yeah.
a tome that I've got to read.
Yes.
But no, it's not like
Especially
that.
with
So I
30
think
kids.
I think when I was trying to think about it, I was thinking, I reckon that's a really big thing this year.
And that would have to be testament to the fact that they've absolutely found their voice.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, that
Through all
would
the mentor
so
texts.
want to read that. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
big.
My students do love reading. That's the other thing. But they've always loved reading. But I
Yes.
think they're more intentional about their reading and they're diversifying their reading for pleasure as well.
Not
That was
that
more than one sentence.
Not that I
That was
want
more than
to
one sentence.
piggyback off you, Liz, but I think as well, I'm very much looking forward to reading their autobiographies when they're finished. And I started reading a couple of them now, and I know it's kind of maybe a little bit cheesy, but it makes me feel really, really good as a teacher knowing that they have enjoyed writing and reading and learning about themselves and their family and
Their favourite subject.
their favorite subject. But just having a passion for writing and for reading, and that it can be from something, very small that can then spiral out into something, massive and beautiful. So I've really enjoyed watching them grow throughout the whole process, and even myself as a teacher being reflective and seeing their engagement, increase, and their confidence in giving things a go that has transferred across all other curriculum areas and also outside of school too, that they are capable of doing this. And, literature isn't something to be scared of. It's not something to worry about and to feel like you're a failure in, that you are capable of doing it. And seeing that realization for some of my students it's been really quite beautiful. So, not to try and make it emotional and tear jerking, but I've been very blessed to see that process sort of all come together now, and it's been wonderful to see their achievements that they've made. So I'm really proud of them and how far they've come, and very lucky to be working with Liz and a whole bunch of wonderful colleagues back at Bridgewater. So,
But they're important things, aren't
Yeah.
they? The how we can feel about our work, the crafting, the art and the craft of our own work, and the difference that makes, the intentional planning and noticing and giving children entry points.
And giving children
And-
a chance to share it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And actually want
and
to
it's
share it.
appreciated
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And, there's an amazing thing right there in you saying, that how much you've enjoyed reading their writing. And Liam's, you're talking about how much they've enjoyed doing their writing. But the fact that it isn't just us, the teacher, who's going to enjoy that writing, but they're clearly understanding. They've got that message that they write so that others can read it.
Yeah.
And that, bottom line, is what writing is for, isn't it? So it's not just doing it because we've got to do it, but because we want someone to read this. So let's wrap up on that pretty powerful little piece of, reflection. Reflection on the year.
This is about a pangolin. I'm not food. I'm not medicine. I'm life. I'm not here. I'm life. I'm just a stolen life. I'm not silence. I'm life. I'm not a knife. I'm life. I'm just a taken life. My life just isn't behind bars. I'm a glistening life. That's part of that. That's I'm reading from her draft.
Yes.
And it's lots of changes, but yes, she was trying to write from getting that emotive
Yes.
way. There's lots more to it too, but this is the wild as well. She's written one from the wild.
Oh, she's written from two
Yeah.
perspectives there. Fantastic. Now, what animal did you say?
A pangolin.
Yeah.
Are you going to ask me what that is now?
No, I won't, because I know I've heard of it, but do you know what it's going to make me do? It's going to go and make me look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So quite a strange looking
Yes.
creature,
Yeah.
but an interesting one.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is the original draft. I have big hooves. I live in forests. My hooves dig for food. I like snow. I run around. I eat grass. That was the first draft. My hooves can barely be seen as I run through the Arctic tundra. We munch on grass. What else do we do? Run with Santa in his sleigh. Santa sleighs presents. That's the fantasy. Reality is different. Hunting, hiding, stalking. Food is scarce. The wind blows me this way and that. The snow blocks the green grass. Coffee, the answer to everything. Coffee, the brown drops of heaven. Coffee, the reason I live. Coffee, why drink anything else? Coffee, the best thing in the whole world. Coffee, can't live without it. Coffee. Oh, yeah, and there's also my family. Coffee. Coffee, eggs, bacon, showers. I carry the mug out of the kitchen, out of the way of my kids who are making eggs on toast. I sit down with a grunt. Slurp. The glorious coffee is all gone. To my surprise, my lovely daughter brings over a plate of delicious eggs and bacon. I eat it gratefully. The weekends are almost the only time I have with everyone in the house, so I try to make the most of it. Sometimes it ends because my daughter is up a tree or the boys are playing. Hang on. Is that the bow and arrow? This craziness is normal to me. I'm going to join in.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. We've loved to see that so many of you have subscribed to our episodes from all corners of the world. The Teacher's Toolkit podcast is all about giving you an insider's guide to top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy teaching and learning. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter via the website. You'll receive advance notice on blogs, podcasts, events, and ways to contact us. But to wrap up, thank you so much, Liz and Liam, for coming to bring your world into this world, to share your reflections and insights into the art and craft of what you've been doing in that integration of reading, writing, or that literacy integration this year. You've been so generous in sharing so much of the insights, and I know we only picked 2 of those areas to talk about, but it gave us a little bit of an anchor to explore that a little bit further. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Okay, thank you, Liam and Liz.
Thanks, Sharon.
All the best. Thank you to all the listeners, and wish you all the best too. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.